So how can you get more information into working memory? We said that it has a limit of 7 plus or minus 2 items, right? Imagine that there's a list of numbers that you need to memorize. So you have all these numbers to memorize. It's more than 7 plus or minus 2, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 pieces of information. So this is going to be very difficult for someone to be able to remember as individual pieces of information, right? So how can we get more into our working memory? Is there anything that we can do? Yeah?
Grouping and relating to each other.
Yeah, we can chunk things, right? Instead of trying to memorize 1, 4, 9, 1, we could memorize 14, 91, 62, 53, 64, and 9, right? And then instead of having 11 things to remember, we have, I think that was 6, right? 6 things to remember. Is there any better way to remember this particular piece of information? Can we group it together even more compactly? How? So this grouping, this 1, 4, 9, 1, this is chunking, right? We're grouping things together. Chunking is just putting information together in a way that's going to be easier to remember. What's an easier way to remember this set of numbers? Shah, did you look up there? Do you recognize the pattern?
Yeah, it's the square of the numbers.
It's the squares of numbers, right? Which numbers?
The integer.
Hmm?
Positive numbers, integers.
But it's not all the positive numbers. It's
1 square, 2 square, 3 square, 4 square, 5 square, 6 square, and 7 square.
It's just the first 7 numbers squared, right?
Yeah.
So all you have to remember is 1 to 7 squared. If you think 1 to 7 squared, if each of those things is a chunk, that's 4 chunks. But if you think about, okay, it's the group of numbers 1 to 7, that's 1 chunk. And then squared, that's another chunk, right? So it's easy. 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 2, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, right? There's a pattern there. So if you can recognize the patterns in things, or even if there is no pattern, if you can create your own pattern to sort of organize things together and chunk them together, you can often fit more information into your working memory. Does that make sense? Because each chunk, instead of holding one tiny thing, holds a broader concept, holds a larger number of things. All right, so what types of long-term memory do we have? Last class we had a question about if you remember that Ataturk was the founder of the Turkish Republic, what type of memory is that? And there are different answers to that question. There's declarative memory. What else? Procedural memory, semantic memory, and episodic memory. What are these different types of memory? We can chunk these types of memories into 2 groups. One group would be not semantic, but declarative. We have a group of declarative memories. What's a declarative memory? It's facts. It's things that you can declare. You can imagine putting on the beginning of a sentence, I declare Ataturk was the founder of the Turkish Republic, right? It's something that you can declare, something that you can state to people. I can also declare that the last class we were in, we were talking about memory, and we started off talking about what memory was, and then we had some math stuff on the board, and we talked about how the boards have memory. What type of memory is this? Well, all of these, I mean, all the memories are memories of things in the past, right? But what type of memory is this? Is it a long-term memory?
Short-term.
It's a short-term memory. Why is that wrong? Yeah, how long do short-term memories last? Seconds. I haven't been saying this to myself since the last time we met, right? If I hadn't went to sleep or anything, maybe it's short-term memory, but it's not seconds, it's long-term memory. 2 days have passed, right? So it's a long-term memory. What type of a memory is it? What type of long-term? Is it a declarative memory? Yes, it is a declarative memory because I can say, I declare to you that this happened last class, right? But it's a particular type of declarative memory. Did someone over here have a question? Yeah.
I was thinking, like, when we talk about memory, do we think of like live things or other things? Because when we say short-term memory, it feels like we think of live things, like animate things. Because, like, why do we say for the board? Why do we talk about the board if it's a short memory thing? Because when we think of short memory, we think of a few seconds, but seconds don't make any sense when we talk about a board.
Yeah, well, so the reason that I talked about the board was just
an
to
example
demonstrate
general.
that a memory isn't necessarily something that only humans have. I was trying to define it without referring to humans. So the memories on the board, these, they don't really fit into the whole sensory versus short-term versus long-term state. I mean, it's sort of a long-term until someone comes and messes with it, right? It'll stay up there until someone.
I mean, this classification, short-term and long-term, does it make any sense?
We're talking about people now.
When we talk about non-animate things.
It could talk. We could make some sense of it when we think about things like computer RAM. So the computer RAM is very much like working memory, right? It's a short-term memory, and as long as the computer is turned on, the electrical signals continue to hit the RAM and keep that information active. But once you turn your computer off, it goes away, right? It decays over time. However, the hard disk is like a long-term memory, right? Or the thumb drive is like a long-term memory. You put it on there, you can leave it alone. You can walk away from it. It doesn't need to be turned on. It's there, right? Does that make sense? So we can refer to some non-animate things, in
But
terms
most
of
of
these.
animate things, like, right, when we talk about memory, we mostly think of.
Yeah, for most of the things in this class, we're talking about animate things, and in the particular animate thing that we're talking about is humans. And we'll often make comparisons across species, but yeah, typically humans. Okay? All right, so we said that it's a declarative memory, my ability to tell you what happened last class. But what type of declarative memory is it? We have two types of declarative memory. Semantic and episodic. So is this an episodic memory that I told you, or is that a semantic memory that I told you? I would argue it's an episodic. Why is it an episodic instead of just a semantic memory?
It's not specific.
It is specific. I told you that we were looking at this board and it had this graph thing on it, right? And then I talked about how it has a memory, and he talked about how the memory is, very delicate, and then I erased it, right? That's very specific.
It's more of an event.
It's about an event. It's about how things unfolded in time. There are semantic memories there, but they're organized in a way that includes time, it includes space, it includes lots and lots of things, right? So what's a semantic memory?
More of a meaning.
It could just be like a meaning, or it could be, there's another term that people often use when they refer to semantic memories. Facts. Just simple facts, sort of by themselves. So saying that Ataturk is the founder of the Turkish Republic, this is a semantic memory, right? On the quiz, semantic wasn't an option. Had semantic been an option, it would have been an even better answer than declarative, right? Because yes, it's a declarative memory, but it's a particular type of memory. It's a fact about Ataturk. It's a semantic memory. But here, I'm giving you a bunch of facts about what happened, but it's organized like an episode. Right? What types of episodes do people see a lot of?
What do you mean exactly?
Does anyone watch TV?
Yeah.
What are those TV shows called? Episodes. Yeah, they're episodes. Oh, did you see The Simpsons 499th episode? Right?
We say this
It's more than just a bunch of facts. Oh, here's Bart Simpson, here's Homer. Right? Those are semantic things, but it's the way that they're all connected together. We have a story to tell. We have not just individual facts by themselves, but lots of things connecting to them in some particular temporal order, right? This happened and then that happened. After I got done talking about, how memory is like, how memory it can be either defined as like an ability or the type of information. That's when we did that, and then after we did that, we did something else, right? There's a particular series of events. Does that make sense? So declarative memories, we often break them down into episodic versus semantic. And the semantic memories are just things like facts. So if I say something like, Ataturk was the founder of the Turkish Republic, just given that information, I would say that's a semantic memory. However, if I give you more information, I remember when I was in 2nd grade, and I was sitting in class, and my teacher was talking about Ataturk, and she told us that he was the founder of the Turkish Republic, right? You're building a story, you're building an episode. Then I'd say that's an episodic memory. Does that make sense? Okay, so what type of memories do we have besides the declarative?
Procedural.
Yeah, the procedural memories. And what are these for? Like, what type of memories are these?
Skills.
I think it has to do with something that we learn naturally, something that we can actually recollect easily.
Okay, something that we can naturally recollect easily. I would say, okay, there might be something to that, but I can recollect very easily that Ataturk was the founder of the Turkish Republic. That's something very easy for me to remember.
Okay, like learning how to drive.
Learning how to drive, very good, very good. So, I like to think about learning how to ride a bicycle. Do all of you know how to ride a bicycle? How do you ride a bicycle?
We don't know.
We just write it.
You can describe this semantically, right? You get on the bicycle and you sort of push off, and then you push down on the pedal, and then you lift your other foot up, and then you start pedaling and you balance, right? Now I can say this to someone, and I would say, just being able to say it, this is not a procedural memory. I need you to demonstrate the procedure, right? Because what you're giving me and telling me how to do it, this is a declarative memory. I declare. You do this, then you do that, then you do this. No, I want to see the procedure, right? So I used to do a lot of swing dancing. So I can tell you about how to Lindy hop. Okay, so you take one step back, and then you kind of rock forward a little bit, and then you run around your partner. I can describe it declaratively, but I can demonstrate the procedure. So I have my partner over here, I step back. Okay, I just did a swing out, right? That's a procedure. It's something that you demonstrate by doing it. I have a procedural memory that I can write the numbers, because I'm doing it. I have a declarative semantic memory that this is for, right? I don't have an episodic memory about when I learned that was for, but I can tell you semantically that that's what it is, and I can demonstrate the procedural memory on how to make it. Make sense? So the procedural memories are memories about how to do stuff, and they're demonstrated by doing those things. Cool? All right, so memory processes. We talked a bit about these before. We have encoding, we have storage, and retrieval. So encoding is putting the things into memory. The storage is basically maintaining those things. And the retrieval is getting that stuff out of the memory. Does that make sense? Last class we were also supposed to talk a little bit about Hebbian theory. So what's the Hebbian theory thing? Yeah.
Associative learning.
Hebbian theory is about associative learning. What does that mean, associative? If I come in to meet you, and I have someone with me, and I say, this is my associate, what does that mean?
I know in Turkish, but I
Can you say it in Turkish, and then someone can translate for me?
ilişkili öğrenme.
Okay, can you translate? Who can translate that?
No, but that's the Turkish way of saying associative.
Oh, it's just basically the word. All right, so what does that mean if this person is my associate?
You have a relation to that person.
There's a relationship, right? And associative learning is about relating things together. And how are things learned according to Hebbian theory? What are we associating together? What relationships are we making? And when we come down and talk about human behavior, we're talking about the brain, right? The brain is causing the behavior, and what is the brain made up of? Yeah, neurons, right? So the neurons, the different things that you hear, the things that you see, they excite different neurons. And what's the idea with heavy learning? You have all these neurons that are excited at the same time, right? So there's this saying that neurons that fire together, wire together. We have these two neurons that are, both firing at the same time, and there are connections between them. There are lots and lots of connections between neurons in the brain. So when we have two neurons that are firing at the same time, what happens to these connections?
They become strong.
Yeah, the connections become stronger, right? So if we think about the brain when we're encoding something, we have neurons that may be connected but very, very weakly. And as we encode things, as we learn things, they get connected more strongly. As we go and review that material, as we're storing it, as we're maintaining that material, these connections get stronger and stronger. Does that make sense? So heavy learning is about neurons that fire together, wire together. Things that come together in pairs, you associate together. Okay, so forgetting. What's forgetting? What does it mean if I say I forgot? Yeah.
I failed to retrieve information.
Good. Forgetting implies that you had information in there already, right? But there was a failure in being able to retrieve that information. There's a particular type of forgetting that's sort of fun. It's called tip of the tongue phenomenon, where maybe you're talking about a band that you like or someone that you know, but you can't remember their name. You know their name at the time, but you can't remember it. And it's like right there. Oh, the band, he has a drummer, and they had an album. They did Enter Sandman. It's a heavy metal band. And you describe them. Does anyone know the band I'm talking about? Metallica. Yeah, it's Metallica. And then later you remember it, right? So there was some problem with being able to access it. But it's not just this temporary thing often when people are talking about forgetting, right? So what causes forgetting?
Learning new information.
Learning new information. How does learning new information make you forget things?
It's interfering with both.
Yeah, so there's this idea about interference. So you can forget if things interfere with the information that you already learned, right? What's the other reason that people are thought to forget information?
Lack of paying more attention.
To not use the information.
Not paying more attention. Not rehearsing.
Okay, so if you didn't rehearse it, okay, but why would you lose it if you didn't rehearse it?
Because it won't be changed, it won't be converted to a long-term memory. Because rehearsal makes it to stay longer, makes it to be a long-term memory.
Okay, so the more rehearsal you got, according to heavy learning, the stronger those connections should get, right? So if you don't rehearse it enough, the connection will be weak, but it should still be there, right? So if the connection is there, why wouldn't we have the memory there? Why would we forget it? We said that there might be things that interfere, right? So maybe we're learning new things that are also connected to these neurons, so the connections for those things get stronger and this relatively is weaker. But if we forget about the interference, why might we forget if that information's there? So you said
Because there is a
you don't use it, and what happens if you don't use it? It decays. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Yeah, there's this statement, use it or lose it. Have you guys heard this? Like, if you exercise, I used to work out way back in the day. I had big muscles. Not really big muscles, but compared to what I have now, I had much bigger muscles. And why don't I have them now? They atrophied, right? Because I wasn't using them to the same extent, so I lost it. Same idea is thought to happen with memory. So if you don't continue to rehearse it, over time that information can decay, right? So the two reasons that people propose forgetting occurs is because one, interference, and the second, decay, right? Now there are two types of interference. What are they?
Proactive and retro.
Good, we've got proactive and retro.
retroactive.
So what is proactive interference?
Depending
Okay, old memories what?
Memories.
Yeah, proactive interference is when you have something there already and it makes it difficult to get new stuff in. If you guys have ever tried to cram before an exam, like you're studying 3 to 4, maybe 6 hours, maybe more, depending, right? At the beginning, your learning is fairly easy, right? Okay, this is this and this is that. And then you get to a point and you're like, I can't fit any more in. Like, it doesn't make sense. Have you guys experienced that? The reason that this happens is because of proactive interference. Imagine that you have a drawer of stuff. In America, people have junk drawers. Do you guys have those here? Where, like, if you find a battery or a screw or a rubber band, you don't have a place just for batteries, so you all put them in the same drawer. And then if you need a screw later on, you pull up in the drawer and you try to find a screw. Do you guys have those here? Yeah, a couple people do. Okay, anyway, so imagine that we find a screw, we put it in there. We find a battery, we put it in there. We find some other stuff, we put it in there. I have kids, so they just take toys and they put them in there too, right? So I'm storing memories. I have stuff in there. And the more memories I store, the harder it gets to put the new things in, right? At some point, this is kind of full. So if I want to put something new in, it won't go. Now, something I could do is I could take everything out and I could organize and make sure everything fits in more neatly, right? That's sort of like what happens when you learn something and then you rehearse the old stuff. You go back and you review, right? So you can keep the old stuff and fit the new stuff in too, right? So proactive interference is like a full drawer. The old stuff stops you from getting the new things in. Make sense? Okay, now think about the drawer with the back end that's broken. So there's no back end to the drawer. Now we put in some stuff, right? Then we put in some more stuff. And what happens as we put in more and more stuff? As we put in more and more stuff, that new stuff is going to push the old stuff out, right? So the new information is acting retroactively, acting in a way that's going back. You guys maybe have heard about retro. Oh, that's so retro. When people talk about fashion, so they're dressing up like they were in the 80s or a way that, you know, people in the past dressed up. It's something that's going back. So with retroactive interference, the new stuff is interfering with the old. How can we avoid proactive interference? Imagine that I give you lists, and I'm going to have you try to remember the lists. So I say like dog, cat, chair, monkey, desk. Okay, what was on the list?
Desk, chair.
Desk, chair.
Monkey. Dog.
Dog. Cat. Okay, and then I give you another list. Orangutan, bottle, television, clock, radio. Okay, I give this to you again. As this continues to go on, the things from the past are going to start interfering. She should be like, oh man, was radio on the last list? Or was that something from earlier? Oh, I can't remember. Right? How can you release someone from this proactive interference? Does anyone know? Release from proactive interference. If I change the type of lists, so previously I was using living things, actually specifically animals, and then like furniture stuff. If I switch to a new category, like blue, pink, banana, grape, now instead of using animals and furniture, I'm using colors and fruit. So if I ask her what's on the list, she knows that the list was colors and fruit. So none of that old stuff is going to interfere, right? So if you want to use this when you're studying, what should you do? How can you study more effectively by limiting the amount of proactive interference that you experience? It's not repeating here. The repeating isn't the crucial thing. You have to read with your life? No, that's not it either.
Maybe, I don't know if it's a correct term, but like mind map.
No?
Vacuum collection.
No? Okay, I'll give you two two choices, okay? We're going to study psychology only on Mondays. We're going to study psychology for 3 hours on Monday. And on Tuesday, we're going to study philosophy. We'll study our philosophy for 3 hours. And on Wednesday, we'll study math for 3 hours, right? Or we can study 3 hours on Monday. We'll do psychology, then philosophy, and then math. And then on Tuesday, we'll do psychology, then philosophy, and then math, each 1 hour. And then on Wednesday, we'll do psychology, philosophy, and then math. Which would be better according to what we know about proactive interference?
First one.
Yeah, the second one, for those of you who said the second one would be better. Why? Because if you're studying all of psychology at the same time, all this proactive interference is building up. And by switching to a new subject area, then you're not going to get confused, or as confused, with the stuff that you learn later with the stuff that you learned earlier. Does that make sense? So it's much better to distribute your studying according to the Atkinson-Shiffrin, because you need to rehearse. But it's also a good idea so you can avoid this huge buildup of proactive interference.
I
Yeah.
don't understand.
Can anyone explain what I just said? Yeah, go ahead.
Trying to tell us that for us to solve the problem with proactive memory, that we have to study something similar at a particular time, then different one on another schedule. That we don't have to study something different thing at a time and stretch.
Can you say that again?
You said for us to, we're talking about proactive.
Yeah, how to avoid proactive
You said
interference.
for us to avoid proactive, that we should avoid studying something at stretch
Yes.
at a particular time. That it should be scheduled in a way that similar thing will be studied at a particular period of time.
So maybe so part of it, yes, absolutely right. I am saying that you shouldn't study one thing for a huge chunk of time. But I'm not saying necessarily that you should study psychology always first. You could do psychology, math, philosophy, and then the next day you could do philosophy, math, psychology, and the next day you could do it at different times. The key thing here with the proactive interference is when you're studying one thing that's all related together, if it's all related together, then some of those connections are being used by each other, right? So we need some time, actually, to allow those connections to consolidate. This happens during sleeping. One of the questions for the current study guide was about sleep, right? And sleep is something very important. You need some time to go by to allow those connections to sort of consolidate. If you keep on dumping more information in, the information within that group gets confused. So by studying a subject for a short amount of time before you start getting really confused about what this means or what that means, and then switch to another subject, now you're using different sets of neurons, right? So you're not overlapping the information, the content, and by doing this, it allows you to learn more in a single study session. Yeah.
I don't know, but generally speaking, maybe this would propose a solution to this problem, proactive, like forgetting and stuff. But
It's not proactive forgetting, it's called proactive interference. Let me write the interference up here. And the proactive interference is thought to lead, to cause forgetting.
No. But generally speaking, isn't it just better to study one subject in one day, so that you don't just put all focus on that subject and you relate what you study? Because you cannot relate history to psychology. You cannot relate psychology, for example, to computer science. So you will just have one day to study one thing. You can relate. You can associate your information. I remember there's a university in Norway, I think, where they have in one semester you study one subject. In the whole semester you just study one thing. But you start from the beginning level and then you go all the way to the advanced.
Right.
So this is what they do. So that by the end of the semester you just focus on one topic. By the end of the semester you will be you have so much knowledge and so much application, so much things. So that
there are competing influences. So, I mean, the idea that he's talking about, and this is actually well demonstrated in the memory literature, if you have this sort of base of information, it makes it easier to connect new things to that. If you're starting learning about a subject for the very first time, often it can be difficult because you don't have that base of knowledge. This is why you should take Introduction to Psychology before you take an advanced psychology class. So you have this sort of base of information that you can connect things in. Now you talk about schools where they have very intense sessions where you only study one thing. I actually really enjoy learning like this. But from a proactive interference standpoint, it's a difficult thing because as you continue to do one thing over and over again, the interference is building up. So you want to do something else. If you practice piano, does anyone play piano? No, okay. Does anyone play an instrument? Okay, what instrument do you guys play? The cello, great. When you practice the cello, what do you do?
Actually, that's very much what I will practice, but in the beginning of the role practice.
Okay.
I'm playing electric guitar.
You play, okay. And how do you practice?
My teacher gave me some paper about the notes, I don't know, notes, and after that I tried to play.
Okay. How about athletes? Do we have athletes in here? I'm looking for something. No, I'm not kidding. When I was a kid, and I played the piano, they had like warm-up exercises. Do the warm-up exercises first, right? Athletes do this. They stretch before they do their things. And then they do something else, right? They warm up, and then they work on strength to get stronger. So I'm out of the piano now. But so athletes, they do different things, right? So they, like a football player, they'll work on strength training so they become stronger, so they can kick the ball harder. They work on speed training so they can run faster, right? They work on technical skills, ball dribbling, and things like this. And if you want to learn how to dribble, right? So that's like one subject. How do you learn how to dribble? Do you just spend one day dribbling? No, you split this stuff up, right? So you do some simple calisthenics to get warmed up, then you do some strength exercises, then you do some sprints to work on speed, then you work on technique, and then you play a match, right? So you're getting these little topics one at a time, right? When I was swing dancing, I wanted to learn like all of these moves. So there were lots and lots of different moves. There was the inside turn, and the outside turn, and the Texas Tommy, and the Charleston. And I would come in and I would say, wow, I want to do all this stuff. But if I tried to do everything in one day, I would get confused. Wait a minute, did I do it like this or... Because information was getting confused because of proactive information. And retroactive information too. These processes are both going on at the same time. Right? So instead you break things down into pieces. I'm going to learn this move today. I'm going to work on this particular type of scale today. I'm going to work, does that make sense? You don't do the same thing over the whole class. Lots of times in these intensive structured learning classes, they talk about theory for a while, and then they'll go to application, right? So you're not continuing to focus in just learning more and more and more on the same thing, letting the proactive interference build up, but then switching to something new that's also related, but that's going to allow you to get released somewhat from the proactive interference. Make sense? Yeah.
I think that's also very much about the nature of what we learn, because if you're learning that something needs a lot of concentration, deep thinking, then you can just jump from subject to this other subject, because if you're, I don't know, like doing something very complex, fluid mechanics, or I don't know, advanced math or something, you need to really get deep and spend time on that.
Good.
But if you're learning something very simple, then that's very much helping, I think. Like, you can, of course, refresh your mind by doing something else and then going back and stuff. So,
But even things with like fluid dynamics, I don't know a whole lot about fluid dynamics, but I do know a bit about thermodynamics. And if I want to learn about thermodynamics, these are complicated subjects, and I would it's better for me to learn a little bit about this one thing and then to move on to something else than to keep going and say, okay, here's the first law of thermodynamics and here's how it relates to perpetual motion machines. Here's the second law of thermodynamics and how it, and then at some point I'm like, wait, was that the first law or the second law or the third law, and how did this get it, right? So you cover one thing, you spend some time on getting it, then you move to something else. All right, but you mentioned this thing about the depth of information, which is related to what? So for today we're supposed to talk about study skills. And there was something that related a lot to depth of processing. What was that called?
Levels.
Levels of processing. So levels of processing theory. What does this say about how people should learn? The blank you study, the better you'll do on the test.
The deeper you process information,
Uh-huh.
like when you're decoding it, the easier it will be, or the more your memory will last.
Yeah, the whole idea with levels of processing is that the deeper you process something, the better you'll be able to remember it. And this is related to attention. How much attention you focus on something, the better you'll be able to remember it. So if you're busy trying to learn while you're also watching TV and getting on Facebook, you're not completely attending to the subject, right? And by not attending as much, it's going to be harder to remember that information than if you were studying that information by itself. Now, the way people did this is they would give people lists of words. Berry, horse, catch. I'm going to give you guys all a list of words, and I'm going to have you do different things with it. I'm going to give you guys a task, and your job is to determine whether each word has an E in it. Okay? So, now, does this word have an E in it? Yeah. This one, does this have an E on it?
Yes.
How about this one? No. Okay. This is an orienting task. It's something that people, a way that people are going to orient to the information. Now when they do this, this is very shallow. It doesn't have to take a lot of brain power to answer this. All you need to know is that this is an E, right? And then you can just look through. Yes, there it is right there. Okay, yes, there it is right there. Right, very simple. You guys, it's going to be a little more complex. I'm going to ask you guys if it rhymes with Larry. So, we give you the same list of words and ask you if each word rhymes with Larry. Does this rhyme with Larry?
Yes.
How about this one? No? This one? No, this is a little bit deeper. You can't just say, aha, this is an E. You have to say the word to yourself. Okay? Barry, Barry, Barry. Yeah, Barry and Larry, they rhyme. They sound similar, right? So it's not just looking for a simple letter. You have to actually say the word in order to figure out if it rhymes, right? So this is a bit deeper processing. Now, give another group of people a different task, a deeper task. We're going to ask you if it fits into a sentence, okay? So, imagine that the sentence is, the teacher gave me a blank. We're going to ask if these words fit in. The teacher gave me a berry. Does that make sense? Yeah, I could give you a berry. How about the teacher gave me a horse? Does that make sense? Theoretically, I could give you a horse, right? It's possible for me to give you a horse. I would say, yes, that it does fit in. Why a teacher would give you a horse, I have no idea. But it does fit in the sense that I could give it to you. Teacher gave me a catch. No. Teacher gave me a catch? No. Right? These are nouns. I can give you a noun. I can't give you a catch, which is a verb, right? So you have to not just say the word, but you have to think about what the word is and what it means and how it fits in with something, right? Now, when I have you do this, I don't tell you, but I'm going to give you a surprise test later. So, okay, test time. I give you a blank piece of paper and ask you to write down all the words that you can remember that were on the previous list. Okay? You had no idea that this was coming. So I want to see what you learned when you were doing this other task. So what type of learning am I looking at? Incidental or intentional? Incidental. It were things that you learned without trying to learn them. You weren't trying to learn, okay, I'm going to have a test. Let's learn berry, horse, and catch, and all the other words on the list, right? If you were trying to do that, that would be intentional learning. If I told you there's going to be a test later, then you are trying to learn that information. So I didn't tell you, so you weren't trying to, so I'm measuring your incidental learning. So how well do you remember this information if I didn't tell you that you're going to be tested on it? If we look to see how people perform on this, percent recalled, and we have the E versus the rhyme versus the sentence. People remember some when they do the E, they remember more when they do the rhyme, and they remember even more when they do the sentence, which suggests what? It suggests that the deeper people process this information in the first place, the better that they're going to be able to remember it. Does that make sense? Now, imagine that I was going to give you a different type of test. So I want you to tell me that the test is going to be to go through a bunch of words to tell me whether there's an E in the word or not. Right? And I'm going to see how fast you can do this, how fast you can get through it. Now the people that did the E before, how good should they be at doing this? Very good, because they've already figured out the words that they have the E's in it. And how about the group that did the deep processing? You know, the teacher gave me a berry, the teacher gave me a cat, the teacher gave me a clock. How should they do? Comparatively. Not as good, right? So this suggests it's not just the depth of processing that matters, but it's how the processing when you learn something matches up with the processing that you need to do on the test. Does that make sense? So, if I'm giving you guys essay tests, how should you learn the material? How should you rehearse the material? You should write. Yeah, if I'm going to give you essay tests after class, you should go home and you should write little essays about what you learned, right? And by writing little essays about what you learned, this is going to help you prepare for the essay test. But I'm not giving you essay tests. I'm giving you multiple choice tests. So what should you do to prepare for this? What's the best way you can prepare? Learn the concepts. Okay, the concepts are definitely important, but how can you learn the concepts? You can learn the concepts a lot of different ways. You could use flashcards. You could use, you could write essays.
Find psychology tests online.
Yeah, you should find psychology tests online, or even better, write your own tests. Say, okay, what is long-term memory? And create a bunch of multiple choice questions, right? And by doing this, you're going to be engaging in the same type of processing that you will be when you take my test. And if you were to do this, I had a student a previous semester that did this, and then he sold his tests to other students. And the students that took his tests did better on my exams. Kind of cool. All right, see you guys next Monday.